Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Mark Swan, and I hope you are having a weird and wonderful week. I know I am. It is spring, so we are getting our spring cleaning done, getting done with some projects, leaving that winter cold behind, just having a good time. I'm very excited, almost done writing my book. That's pretty cool. Working on some freelance stuff and otherwise just trying to see if I can hang out with some family because it's been a year and I haven't seen any of my family. I'm so excited that things are turning back to relative normalcy. But hey, it's not all bad. I have been getting some reading done, which, boy, if you were to tell me 2 years ago that I would have time to read, I would call you crazy. But that's what's going on in my life. I have so many things to read. I am currently reading The Hike by Drew Magary. I very highly recommend it. It is a weird, surreal piece of fiction. I think I would liken it to the adult version of Alice in Wonderland. Very similar setup and story. There is a man who gets lost on a hike and ends up in a surreal and psychedelic world where many unfortunate things happen to him. And it's very, very short. I think I'm not even 100 pages in and I'm already on like chapter 30 or something like that. Like, chapters are very, very short and a lot happens in a little word space. I like stuff like that. It's exciting. I'm also rereading Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. This was originally a BBC short series written by Neil Gaiman, and I guess he adapted it to book form just so he could give a little bit more detail to the characters and the plot. Really, really cool. If you are at all familiar with Gaiman's work, then this will not disappoint. It is weird, it's extremely unique, and it's also just a little bit familiar. So, well, this isn't the GSMC book podcast, although that podcast does exist. This is the GSMC Weird News Podcast, and I just have so much weird news for you today. Today, I start this with a sigh just because I'm disappointed, but I had to go over it. I think everybody's knowing about this, but I needed to cover it anyway. We are talking about the hoarding gas phenomenon, because why, my fellow Americans, why? Last year it was toilet paper and now it's gas. We're going to go through what happened and why it's happening. After that, I am recounting the tale of Harambe, the gorilla who met an unfortunate end. It's actually the 5-year anniversary of his death, and so we're going to hit that weird story and its effect that it had on the entire world. I don't think anybody was really expecting that. After we talk about Harambe, our third segment will be celebrating the return of the Noid. I'm seeing that the Noid is back, and if you're unaware of who the Noid is, we'll get into it. He's basically a Domino's pizza mascot from the 80s, and his story is so weird and detailed that we'll go through it. I felt it was in need of its own segment, but he's back. And when you hear why he left in the first place, you might be like, why is he back? And then to top it all off, I'm going to tell you about the third book that I'm reading right now, called The Element Encyclopedia of Secret Societies by John Michael Greer, and we are going through 5 secret societies you may not have heard of. Step on over, Illuminati. You're no secret society anymore. Everybody knows about you. You don't even want to be a secret at this point. Everybody knows you exist. Everybody knows there's some secret cabal out there that's pulling the puppet strings. But Secret societies are something that have pervaded throughout the course of human history, and we're going to go through 5 that you may not have heard of. Well, hey, without further ado, let's get right into it. On May 7th, the Colonial Pipeline Company, which transports about 45% of all gas and diesel consumed on the east coast of the United States, was forced to shut down after a cyber attack. Can you believe this stuff? We are living in the world and time of cyber hackers shutting down entire gas pipelines and putting a stop to society. I thought this kind of thing only happened in sci-fi movies. Like, we should be getting Tom Cruise on this. Unfortunately, Tom Cruise is a movie star and therefore probably wouldn't be as much help. Plus, this is the real world where action stars, action heroes don't actually exist necessarily. The shutdown of the pipeline led the federal government of the United States to declare a regional emergency to allow transportation of fuels through tanker trucks to tide over the impact of shortages. The mysterious cyber terrorist group employed a type of application called ransomware, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. A cyber terrorist would use ransomware on an entity to take their files and make them unavailable to the original user, and then ask the user to pay them a certain amount of money before they could get those files back. Usually when you hear about a ransomware attack, it is against a octogenarian who doesn't necessarily understand the internet or computers and has unfortunately fallen into the hands of someone who can exploit them for their relative wealth. Usually it's happening to older people, the elderly, but we are seeing it happen to a major oil corporation. The offenders in question, a group that calls themselves Darkside, were demanding over $5 million in Bitcoin, and using the ransomware, they shut down the Colonial Pipeline. Colonial has since paid the ransom. We're always talking about crypto on these shows. Colonial has since paid the ransom, and the pipeline is apparently back up and operating, but not before resulting in a week long of panic and discrepancy among Americans. And unless you use the GSMC Weird News podcast as your sole source of news, you have probably seen what people were doing in the South as well as other parts of the country, which was hoarding gas. It was probably no news to you, my dear listener, that gas prices were skyrocketing after the ransom attack, where customers were seeing prices per gallon up in the high $3 range. We haven't seen prices that high since the early 2010s. Out here around my neck of the woods, I was seeing gas kind of breach $3, but I don't really use an automobile very often, so this didn't really affect me other than I get to report on it. The Darkside group is an anonymous group of cyber terrorists who are more than likely made up of veteran developers in Russia. The group has released several statements saying that they are apolitical and only concerned about making money, and has also donated some of the proceeds from their attacks to charities. These guys seem to be a sort of Robin Hood outfit, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. They aren't necessarily trying to do harm to Americans, but rather to companies with lots of money. Oil is and continues to be a controversial topic for many people out there. It is our most used form of traditional fuel, but we are starting to transition to alternatives simply because of the effect that oil usage has on the planet. Emissions from oil and diesel usage do irreparable harm to the planet, and many climate scientists warn that if we do not find alternatives soon, that we could be in real danger. And I am editorializing, but it is possible that this may be one of the reasons why Darkside attacked a large oil company like it did. There is no evidence that this is some sort of Russian plot to harm America, but that's what it did. Regardless, I just realized something. I have started the last 3 shows with news regarding Russia. Sorry about that. I guess they're just always a common topic for these weird news shows. Anyway, like I said, the cost of oil barrels shot up significantly, with them being around $69 per barrel last Friday, as of this recording, and the American public reacted to the price hike, as you may expect, by overreacting. Shortly after the attack was announced and the regional emergency was declared, several gas stations reported running out of gas entirely, and the general public responded with varying degrees of concern and anxiety. And since we are living in the age of constant and immediate information, it wasn't long until pictures of, I'm just going to say it, stupid people were gathering gas in containers like trash bags, Tupperware, tubs, and hoarding them in the car by the gallon. People, did we not learn from last year? Does nobody remember the toilet paper shortage? It was an overreaction, an overblown sentiment, and it meant nothing. The only thing it did was deprive others, and it didn't help you at all. I bet you still have toilet paper. I don't want to sound like a pundit here, but we have to stop reacting to stuff this way. We need to be mindful to the people around us and understand that we can't panic at the thought of inconvenience. We have people who were putting gas in trash bags before loading them into their car and other non-gas safe containers, neglecting the fact that gasoline is highly flammable and, if not contained properly, dissipates and becomes basically useless in no time. In fact, a woman in South Carolina exploded her car because she was hoarding gas, and she did not take care of it properly. She shouldn't have been hoarding it in the first place. According to the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, the driver of the car turned left onto a road and accelerated her vehicle in an attempt to elude law enforcement, probably because they were going after her for improperly holding gas, and she ended up over-accelerating and flipping the vehicle. And since, once again, gasoline is highly volatile, it ignited inside her car, and multiple explosions were heard from inside the vehicle by police and other onlookers. The driver emerged from the car and she was on fire, and police pushed her to the ground and put the flames out. There is video of this online. I don't really recommend watching it. It's just sad. The woman ended up being completely fine. Just some burns, but she's alive and healthy to panic buy gas in the future. Now, as I said before, the ransom has been paid, and Colonial says that the pipeline is back up and operating, and they are transporting product at this very moment. Things are back to normal. According to their statement, following this restart, it will take several days for the product delivery supply chain to return to normal. Some markets served by Colonial Pipeline may experience or continue to experience intermittent service interruptions during this startup period. Colonial will move as much gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel as is safely possible, and will continue to do so until the markets return to normal. In the meantime, and this is my statement, not Colonial's, in the meantime, don't panic buy something just because it is temporarily scarce. In fact, don't panic buy stuff anyway. Just keep it together. I know we are going through a lot right now, but America, we're starting to become a meme. Other people are laughing at us for stuff like this. There are pictures and videos all over the internet. It's so embarrassing. Like, seriously, a guy brought, there's a video of a guy who brought 20 just glass containers, Tupperware, whatever he had in his kitchen, and he's just filling it up with gas. I would put the video up on this podcast if I could properly convey, but you'd mostly just hear me groaning. It's just really silly, you guys. Not to mention ignorant, not to mention dangerous. That's all the insulting I'm going to do, other than saying it's embarrassing. And hopefully we've all learned a valuable lesson. The Colonial Company has since expressed that they will be beefing up their software security. Gee, good idea. You're a majority supplier of one of the world's largest commodities. Maybe we should keep that antivirus up and running and up to date. Maybe it was running on Windows 98 or something. I don't know. More and more, I find our world transitioning into a sci-fi dystopia, and it's a little scary. It's a little cool. But I didn't think I would be waking up last week and hearing about a cyber attack that crippled an entire half of the nation and otherwise had a lasting effect on the country as a whole. Cyber attacks are no joke, man, and this is only tangentially related, but this is my advice to you to never trust a stranger on the internet, and especially don't trust their threats. A lot of times this ransomware stuff involves someone gaining your trust either over the internet or on the phone, and then just holding your stuff ransom via your computer. It's very possible. It affects thousands and thousands of people a year. Once again, mostly the elderly. But if you ever find yourself on the phone with somebody who's trying to talk about your auto insurance plan and you're like, I don't have a car, it's very possible they're trying to get you into a situation where they can ransomware you. Avoid it. I hate to say it, but don't trust strangers. It doesn't matter that we're living in a friendly, modern world. There are those out there who are trying to scam you. And if they can do it to one of the biggest oil companies in the country, they can do it to you. Keep your stuff on lockdown. Keep your phone passcode in your memory only, and otherwise use different passwords for different websites. Don't give anybody your email unless you explicitly want them to contact with you with it. I'm just a little worked up over this. Seeing people collecting gas in trash bags. Here's my question. These are the same people that hoarded the toilet paper, right? Like, these people come home with their trash bags full of gasoline, and they put the bags of trash they put the bags of gas next to their monument, their castle made out of toilet paper that they're never, ever, ever going to use. I don't know, people. Let's do better. Let's just do better. All right. After the break, we are approaching the 5-year anniversary of the death of Harambe, the gorilla who captivated the internet. It's a weird, wild story, and it has more to do than just zoo safety. We got that and more. And then at the end of the show, we have 5 secret societies you may not have heard of. This is the GSMC Weird News Podcast, and we'll be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. And hey, I say it every time, but I just gotta reiterate, man. The GSMC Podcast Network is a network with dozens of podcasts, and not just weird news ones. We got real news. None of that weird news. They got that news that you take seriously. We got book podcasts. I should go on that one with all these freaking books that I'm reading. We have music podcasts and movie podcasts. We have podcasts for any taste. And you might just find something that you like listening to that isn't my beautiful, sultry voice. Before the break, we were throwing ourselves into a panic and taking whatever containers we would down to the Citgo and just paying $3 per gallon to just load up on gas that would probably waste and dissipate in the next week or so before we could use it. How were you planning to get trash bag gas into your tank once you got it home? Those fuel pumps work very explicitly, and they work explicitly with modern fuel tanks to only work in conjunction together. Maybe you could do a funnel system, but something tells me if you're the type of person to hoard gas based on a panic buy, you might not know how to funnel gas correctly. I've only had to funnel gas once. No, I was not stealing. We were moving gas from one friend's car to mine, and that involved putting a hose down there. It's not fun to get a mouthful of gas. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Let's move on before I get up in arms again. It really did upset me. And unfortunately, we are going to go from one upsetting topic to another as we remember Harambe. Do you remember Harambe? 5 years ago, zoo dramatics led to an unforeseen worldwide phenomenon. And I love using that word phenomenon. According to knowyourmeme.com, on May 28th, 2016, a 4-year-old boy crawled into the enclosure of the western lowland gorilla Harambe at the Cincinnati Zoo. The gorilla then grasped the child and began dragging him about the enclosure before a Cincinnati Zoo employee fatally shot Harambe with a rifle. That day, a YouTuber uploaded footage of the incident to YouTube, where it gathered upwards of 12 million views and 41,000 comments over the next 2 days. The next day, news of the fatal shooting spread to Reddit, of all places, where most outrage grows these days, and garnered more than 7,000 upvotes and 6,200 comments. That same day, a petition titled Justice for Harambe was created on change.org, which called for authorities to hold the child's parents responsible for Harambe's death. The petition gained over 338,000 signatures. Meanwhile, the hashtags for Justice for Harambe and RIP Harambe began circulating on both Facebook and Twitter. You may remember the controversy around this. There was a big discussion about who was at fault here. There was a lot of scrutiny towards the zoo for using lethal force against the gorilla. However, to the Cincinnati Zoo's credit, they probably know how to handle a dangerous gorilla situation better than an internet commenter. It is unfortunate that Harambe had to be put down so suddenly, but what else are you going to do? Are you going to try and rescue the kid somehow? I think there was always the argument that they could use tranquilizers as opposed to lethal force, but those things take time to kick in, and this gorilla could have done serious harm to the boy. And yes, the parents should have felt some responsibility for not properly watching after their kid, but have you ever taken a kid to the zoo? There's so much going on there. You could be distracted. I'm just saying, yeah, we can criticize the parents, but sometimes you just can't control your kid. Nobody could accurately predict what would happen in that scenario, and Cincinnati Zoo did not predict that Harambe would become a meme of monumental proportions. News of the gorilla spread fast, and the incident dominated hashtags and social media news. Of course, people with varying degrees of senses of humor started making memes about the poor gorilla with varying degrees of comedy, whether to be taken seriously or not. The gorilla became somewhat of an internet celebrity in the same way that the Doge has, or, I don't know, Bad Luck Brian. Will somebody explain to me how people become meme celebrities? I don't know. I just got a lot of word out about it. One of the memes to catch fire on the internet was referring to a certain piece of male anatomy and having it out for Harambe. This is a safe for work PG podcast, so I'm not going to say it directly, but I think you can use your imagination, or you could look it up on the internet if you really are curious. A lot of people said that they were going to have this particular piece of anatomy out for Harambe in reference to it being some sort of salute in apology or in solidarity for the dead gorilla. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people didn't want this gorilla to die, and that includes the Cincinnati Zoo, but sometimes things don't always go the way that we want them. The mimetic outrage became so present that the Cincinnati Zoo actually released a statement that says, and I quote, "We are not amused by the memes, petitions, and signs about Harambe. Our zoo family is still healing, and the constant mention of Harambe makes moving forward more difficult for us. We are honoring Harambe by redoubling our gorilla conservation efforts and encouraging others to join us." If you ask me, that's a pretty responsible statement. They are being defensive, but it's like they didn't want to shoot the gorilla. It's sometimes you get into these situations where you have to do something that people are going to find unpalatable. I don't know. I am impartial. I wish they didn't shoot the gorilla. If you've listened to past episodes of the podcast that I've hosted, I am a big advocate for animals in general and zoos. I feel bad when a zoo has to answer for something like this. Of course, the outrage didn't end there. There are many stories of Harambe's effect on the social landscape around that time. Some a little less funny than others, as there were groups of advocates who were saying all of the talk for Harambe had racist undertones. I don't know how I feel about that, and I am not qualified to give a a responsible statement on it. Referring back to knowyourmeme.com, Harambe had a wildfire effect on many different parts of the world and many businesses at the time. For instance, a baby gorilla was born in China's Jinhua Zoo. A contest was formed to decide the new name for the baby, and in an overwhelming number of votes, the baby gorilla was named Harambe McHarambe Face, which if you don't get that reference, that's in reference to not only Harambe, but Bodie McBoatface, in which 2016 was a weird time, in which an internet poll was issued to name a British research ship, and there was an overwhelming vote for the name Bodie McBoatface. So, we're getting meta with the memes here. We're going Harambe McHarambe Face for a baby gorilla. After you heard my last segment, do you think the internet handled Harambe's news responsibly, or do you think they let things get out of hand? No, people don't just let things like this get out of hand. Well, let's go back to the 2016 election, where thousands of people did a write-in ballot for Harambe to be the next president of the United States. I want everybody to look back to the 2016 election because we obviously saw what happened there. A millionaire reality TV show host became president, and as possibly due in part to, I'm going to go ahead and say it, probably people my age just not taking the voting process very seriously. I'm not going to say that President Trump won because people were voting for Harambe, but it just goes to show you that people are willing to make a joke out of anything, and sometimes it can be to the detriment of other people. I'm not going to give you my opinion on the election either way. I'll just say maybe the results would have been a little bit differently if people weren't consistently beating a meme like a dead horse. There were other instances of trying to get the gorilla immortalized in other ways. There were calls to rename the Cincinnati Bengals in Harambe's order and to add his face to Mount Rushmore. Harambe's name continues to crop up in meme culture, and especially around this time of year, usually on the anniversary of his death, he will be trending again on Twitter and other social media, and I can only assume that when the 28th hits on the 5th anniversary of Harambe's passing, we will just get more and more tributes to the poor gorilla. And here's a fun one. In February of 2017, an eBay seller put up a Cheeto for auction that supposedly resembled Harambe, and I'm looking at it and it just looks like a Cheeto, but I suppose when you compare it to the picture of the gorilla they have to the pictures left, yes, I guess it kind of looks like a gorilla. I don't know if it looks like Harambe, but I guess it could look like a gorilla. It looks like a chicken, if you ask me. This is just pareidolia in effect. If you are unaware, pareidolia is how we think abstract shapes look like facial features or other recognizable shapes because our brains are trained to make patterns. Anyway, the bidding for this Harambe Cheeto started at $11.99, and the Cheeto was eventually sold for $99,000. Remember what I was saying before the commercial break about how people are just prone to overreact? There's memes, and then there's paying $100,000 for a gorilla-shaped Cheeto. Why did I pick these topics today? I'm just getting outraged over them. I promise you, good listeners, I'm not going to make every GSMC Weird News podcast episode have something to do with apes in zoos. I just saw a random fleeting YouTube video about Harambe, and I was like, how long ago was that? Oh, the anniversary of his death is coming up in a couple weeks. I better do a story about this. It really goes to show you that people really like inside jokes, and memes are just inside jokes that everybody's in on. And we will do our best to laugh at that joke until we are just absolutely exhausted by its relevance. Like, really, why did we let this happen? Why did we let the death of a gorilla turn into this weird satirical statement about so many things? It is one thing to mourn the death of an animal that was put into a situation where it lost its life and it's unfortunate. It's another thing to turn him basically into a clown post-mortem. I mean, this whole event started innocently enough. There were vigils for the gorilla, and of course there was all the controversy trying to place blame on the gorilla dying in the first place. Who do we blame here? Do we blame the zoo? Do we blame the parents? Ultimately, there were many investigations on the events, and pretty much everybody was cleared of any sort of accusations, but that's just not how the internet works. People turned this gorilla into a hero and almost demonized everybody else involved. Harambe has since appeared in video games, in references in movies and television shows. He's been the subject of several songs. If there is one word to describe the gorilla who had such a fateful day, it is immortalized properly. Like, people are not gonna forget this gorilla, and that's the power of memes, man. I don't know. I'm never going to stop talking about it. That's another thing. A lot of my segments are about memes. As we reach the 5-year anniversary of Harambe's death, I can only assume that everybody who was directly involved has probably moved on with their lives. I wonder if the 3-year-old boy who fell into the enclosure in the first place even remembers that happening. And if he doesn't, is he going to grow up and have to deal with the fact that he was the kid who got Harambe killed? Like, my heart goes out to this kid when he's in college and there's like some millennial professor who's like, wait, I recognize your name, and looks him up and realizes that you're the reason Harambe got killed. And then he shows him his Harambe tattoo, and then he, intentionally gives the kid bad grades. I have to assume that the Cincinnati Zoo has moved on since the incident as well, and probably put the memes behind them. Maybe even embrace them a little. It probably sold some tickets to the zoo. Like, I bet there was backlash on ticket sales at first, but ultimately people are going to want to go and pay and to see the zoo where Harambe used to live, and they'll go and point in the enclosure and go, that's where it all happened. In fact, according to Wikipedia, in September of 2017, the zoo added Mishindi, a 29-year-old male western lowland gorilla transferred from the Louisville Zoo. He joined females Chewy and Mara, who were present on the day of the killing. At the same time, the zoo created a new indoor habitat where the public could safely view the gorillas year-round from behind safety glass. I suppose that is the best way to handle that situation. Let's never let this happen again. I know that this is not the only incidence of a child falling into specifically a gorilla habitat, but this is obviously one of the most high-profile ones, and it resulted in a story that has lasted throughout the years. So, to you, Harambe, I'm not pulling out any part of anatomy for you, but I do tributize you. I am sorry that happened to you. And we here at the Weird News Podcast salute you. Hey, after the break, the Noid is back. Are you an old person like me and you remember Domino's Pizza, the Noid? This next segment might blow your mind, because the Noid is a weird example of pop culture that went away for a very specific reason, and we'll get into it. And now he's back, and I just have to ask why. So we're going to talk about the Noid, and then we're going to talk to social media about pizza. And after that, we are going into 5 secret societies that you, the humble listener, may not have heard of. This is the GSMC Weird News Podcast, and we'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Mark Swan. I just stepped outside to get some air. It is lovely out. I'm never going to not enjoy the rainy season. It's so nice and cool. And I needed to calm myself down after our previous two segments. Earlier in the show, we were talking about idiots who hoard gas in Tupperware. Now I just gotta laugh at it, man. I really worked myself up over this last week. Like, what are you doing? And then I further worked myself up by remembering Harambe, the gorilla who enchanted the world with his mimetic qualities. And hey, speaking of memes, when we think of the word meme, it tends to mean something you find on the internet. It's just like a funny image or just a thing that happened that is shared between a lot of people who may or may not know each other. I think if the term existed around the 80s, then the Noid would have most certainly have been a meme. And I've been hyping up the Noid this whole show because this is such a weird thing. The Noid exists as this entity from my childhood that would show up in commercials and kind of freak me out. Does anybody listening have that experience? Not necessarily with the Noid, but you look at something that may have been in the public consciousness back around the time of you being a little kid, and you just remember it deeply disturbing you. That was the Noid for me. There were Domino's pizza commercials when I was about 3 or 4, maybe a little bit older, where the Noid was this claymation humanoid character who screwed with your pizza order. I don't know how to better describe it off the cuff, and we'll get into it in a second, but he was just this entity that when you ordered pizza, he would mess with your order, or he would make sure that the pizza delivery guy didn't get there on time, and the consumer was encouraged to avoid the Noid. We're going to get into it, and I might be mistaken. But why am I talking about the Noid so much? Well, because what happened to the Noid back in the 80s and the early 90s, something very specific and unfortunate happened with that particular character, and Domino's retired the Noid. And once again, we'll get into it. But apparently enough time has passed that the Noid is back, and I saw him in a commercial again, and he is just as disturbing as when I was a kid. There's just a weird, uncanny valley thing happening with this fake humanoid rabbit guy. I don't know how to describe it, and that's why we're going to get into it today. And he's back. He's in a Crash Bandicoot mobile game. He's one of the characters. According to Wikipedia, the Noid, spelled Noid, is an advertising character for Domino's Pizza created in the 1980s. Clad in a red, skin-tight, rabbit-eared bodysuit with a black N inscribed in a white circle on his chest, the Noid was a physical manifestation of all of the challenges inherent in getting pizza delivered in 30 minutes or less. Though persistent, his efforts were repeatedly thwarted. Yep. He was essentially like a Hamburglar type. If you remember such character. I don't know if McDonald's really deals with the Hamburglar anymore. Maybe a little too violent for kids these days. But there was always this weird entity in fast food marketing of the person or creature who doesn't want you to enjoy your food to its fullest. And that's what the Noid was. He was this spirit or fairy or just liminal being like the Slender Man or something who really didn't want you to get your pizza on time. And I don't know. I don't order a whole lot of pizza these days, but back then it used to be such a big thing that if the pizza delivery place couldn't get you your pizza within a certain time frame, usually 20 or 30 minutes within you ordering by the phone, that they would give you a discount or they would give it to you for free. And for some reason, the Domino's Pizza advertising agency decided that they needed to personify this particular aspect of pizza delivery. Is that there's just a guy who tries to make it not happen, so you'll be unhappy with your pizza delivery guy. I don't know. Maybe it was a crude attempt to get you to empathize with their workers, which, if that's the case, I kind of applaud that. Yeah, let's get a cartoon character to make us care a little bit more about our pizza delivery guy, because it's not an easy job. It's not. Like, yes, driving around in your car, there are worse jobs, but heck, it's just working for pizza in general. Just getting stuck in a hot kitchen, making the same thing over and over, and then you are expected to traverse the city as fast as you can. And hey, this was before GPS, so I just give my biggest applaud to pizza delivery workers or food delivery workers in general. GoPuff or just anybody who's delivering your food. And hey, I hope if you're delivering, you're listening to the GSMC Weird News podcast, so I can tell you how much I appreciate you. And honestly, I hope there isn't a Noid-like character coming to interrupt your progress. Ironically, the Noid became quite popular, almost to the sake that people saw him as a positive character. In 1988, CBS planned for a Noid-based cartoon, but the series was scrapped amid complaints that it was merely an advertising ploy and not a show for children. Hey, general public, I have a secret for you. All cartoons are marketing. The Ninja Turtles is not some altruistic cartoon. It was meant to sell toys. It's all marketing. Kids are very easily marketed to. Now, despite that, there were Noid toys. I remember that I had a few. My mom used to go to garage sales and pick me up all kinds of toys. And I remember getting a couple Noids. But in 1989, there was a Nintendo Entertainment System game called Avoid the Noid. And I remember playing this as a kid, and it's weird. You play as the Noid, who once again, in this particular scenario, is the hero, even though he's supposed to represent you not getting your pizza on time. And you used like a yo-yo, and you fought ninjas. And there was a game where you had to eat more pizzas than an evil version of the Noid, even though the Noid was evil anyway. So what happened to the Noid, you may be asking yourself, and that is a legitimate question. And I would not fault you for thinking, well, just like any other advertising scheme, people got tired of the Noid and Domino's wasn't getting the same type of advertising results that they were hoping for, and so they retired the Noid. Unfortunately, that is not the case. On January 30th, 1989, a mentally ill man named Kenneth Lamar Noid thought the ad campaign was a personal attack on him, and he resultingly entered a Domino's restaurant in Georgia armed with a .357 Magnum and held two employees hostage for over 5 hours. In this unfortunate situation, Mr. Noid claimed that Domino's owner Tom Monaghan had stolen his name, and he forced employees to call Domino's headquarters and demand $100,000 and a white limousine as a getaway transportation. Luckily, no one was hurt, as Mr. Noid eventually became hungry and had the staff on hand create him 2 pizzas, and while he was eating the pizzas, the staff ran out the door and escaped to safety. Mr. Noid surrendered to the police shortly after. While shots were fired during the incident, nobody was hurt. Mr. Noid was taken to a mental institution, and he later, unfortunately, took his own life. So, with all of that involved, I'm sure you can understand why the Domino's Corporation decided to possibly retire the Noid for some time. However, that is not the case any longer, as even though the Noid has popped up here and again as pop culture references, and some of those endorsed by Domino's Pizza, he has officially made a comeback as the spokesperson for Domino's as of April of this year. The Noid officially returned in an advertisement about a potential self-driving pizza delivery service, and in a modern take of his original purpose, he tries to stop this robot pizza driver and is foiled Bugs Bunny style. So I guess enough time has passed and we have healed since the absolutely absurd Noid incident. Well, hey, in spite of the morose topic, I did get a little hungry and decided that I would go to social media and ask the question, what's the weirdest thing you would put on a pizza? And I got a bunch of great answers, which I'm going to go through right now. Our first answer comes from Patrick on Facebook, and he says, your butt. Thanks, Patrick. Really taking the question seriously here. Next answer is from Ryan, who says, I made an A1 hot dog pizza once, and that was pretty weird. You're right, Ryan. That is pretty weird, but also sounds kind of good. Like, you would be surprised how well hot dogs combine with other foods. You think it's just sort of like a thing you have when you're lazy or perhaps you've had too much to drink. But I would put hot dogs on my pizza. I put them in my macaroni. I haven't tried it on a pizza, but I would do a hot dog and A1 pizza. That sounds pretty good. Just as long as you cut up the hot dogs. If you just like put a whole hot dog on a pizza slice, I don't know what's wrong with you. Ooh, unless you rolled it. Kind of like the world's fattest pig in a blanket. I might have to make some experiments once I'm done recording here. Amir from social media says, and this is, I'm going to try and do this in my dramatic reading voice. Amir says, another pizza. And on top of that pizza, another pizza. And on top of that pizza, another pizza. And so on and so forth until I finally have some kind of lasagna pizza that will be more powerful than any one single non-lasagna pizza. Thanks for the answer, Mir. I don't really know how to respond to that other than to suggest the Leaning Tower of Pizza. I just came up with that. That was not my writing staff. That was me working off the cuff. You're welcome. Jenny from Facebook says, pickles. That sounds kind of good. It's at my old job, we used to make a hamburger pizza that would sometimes have pickles on it. It was a, cooked hamburger, American cheese, which I thought was weird, ketchup and mustard, and pickles, and it was pretty good. So yeah, I'd put pickles on pizza. I'm all about that. Kane from Facebook says, my expectations of a better life. Wow, Kane, we really just can't have fun here on the Weird News Podcast, can we? We always got to take it cerebral, huh? Well, if you could put that on a pizza, I hope it's tasty. Sounds tasty. Carol from Facebook says, eggs. Breakfast pizza with sausage or pork chili. I've had this. I've had scrambled eggs on pizza. And yeah, I'll tell you right now, breakfast pizza, pretty good combination. John says, another slice of pizza. Yeah, I've done that too. Sure, why not? Sometimes one slice isn't enough. And you don't want to just do two in a row. No, you got to slap the pizza together and press it down until it's like a calzone, basically. It's like a do-it-yourself calzone. Maybe you could sew the calzone together. And finally, Brian from Facebook says, I like broccoli and green chili. Super good. That does sound super good. I've had broccoli on pizza before. I think one of the cool things about living in a metropolitan place like Denver is you will get weird pizza places and they will make some weird dishes for you. But it allows you to try something. It's like, pizza's my favorite food. Well, I don't know. French fries? I don't know. I've loved pizza since I was a little kid. Every Friday we would get pizza. And I think that's how I knew about the Noid, is my obsession with pizza. In addition to it being tasty, the Ninja Turtles liked it. And the Ninja Turtles rock. And once again, the Ninja Turtles were just marketing tools, so it was effective. On me, a little kid. They liked pizza, I liked pizza. And I think I would eat almost anything on pizza. I will eat pineapple on pizza. And I know there's a large amount of people who hear that who are going to click unsubscribe on their podcast app. Don't do it. Just give it a chance. Sweet and salty and cheesy. It's a good combination. I haven't had sardines on pizza. And as I understand it, it's a kind of a staple for some people. And I never even want to bother. I'm not really a big fish guy, but I had a very close friend tell me, try it. Or at the very least, have them bake the sardines on the pizza and then take them off if you don't want to crunch the fish. And supposedly, the oily saltiness is really, really good. I'm going to do it one day. I have been convinced simply because I trust my friends and I love them and I understand that they have good tastes. So maybe I'll do a sardine pizza one day. One thing I like to put on pizza that a lot of people don't really share the sentiment is hot sauce, or specifically buffalo sauce. And if you haven't done this, do this. This is my recommendation to you right now. If you have the chance to get the cheesy stuffed crust pizza from whatever pizza purveyor around you that supplies it, get that. Get just a pepperoni stuffed crust pizza. Order a batch of boneless buffalo wings. Cut the cheesy crust open and put a couple of the boneless buffalo wings inside and wrap it around sort of like a hot dog. It's so good. I had a friend show me this and I swear by it. It's like the best thing ever. I think I'm hungry, you guys. Well, thank you so much for the answers, everybody. I love going to social media to get these. It helps make my segment just a little bit more special. Hey, if you listen to this episode and you have a favorite weird pizza topping, hit me up on social media. I love to talk on social media, and I love to talk about weird news, and I like to talk about weird food. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and all you have to do is look up GSMC Weird News. I'm posting questions all the time, either on Twitter or on my personal Facebook account. So if you want to find me and friend me, I'll probably do it. I basically accept everyone. I just like talking to people. So please hit me up. Let me know your favorite weird pizza topping, or just say hi. I don't know. Let's talk. Anyway, it's been such a fun episode, and the fun doesn't stop here. When we get back, I am going through 5 secret societies that you may not have heard of. This is the GSMC Weird News Podcast, and we will be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark Swan, and maybe you can't tell by the sort of sad and angry topics that we covered today, but I just had so much fun with you guys. It's always a pleasure reporting the weird and unusual to you, my beautiful listeners. I am nothing without you, and I just want to be friends with every single one of you and just hang out. We should build like a clubhouse. We should like start a club, you guys, like a GSMC Weird News Club. And maybe like we could do clandestine things with that club. Like maybe we could contribute gold or money into a big treasure chest, and then after 100 years we'll give that treasure chest to, I don't know, an orphanage or something. Basically what I'm proposing is a secret society. If it's one thing human beings love doing, it's keeping secrets, and it's keeping secrets between their close friends or constituents or other organizers. Doesn't always work well. As much as people love keeping secrets, they love gossiping and giving secrets away. But that doesn't mean that the secret society is just some sort of act of fiction. There are many secret societies throughout the world, and they often serve real-world purposes. I am sure there are those of you out there who are familiar with the Masons, who are not necessarily a secret society, but are a clandestine society nevertheless. Many important political figures throughout the ages of not only the United States, but the entire world were part of the Masons, and the Masons had a large hand in some of our more formative rules and decisions. People are often fond of the idea that there are groupings of people out there who do not wish to be known, but also seem to hold on to a certain level of control. It's a really fascinating topic for a lot of people. It's used as an element in a lot of fiction. Oftentimes, a protagonist in a piece of fiction is welcomed into a secret society as a means for them to gain power and sort of grow as a character. And adversely, secret societies are often portrayed as organizations of people who do not care about the well-being of the general public and often house or inspire antagonists. It involves a little bit of paranoia on the observer's part to believe that there is an entity out there who you don't or can't know about who wishes for your ill-being. It's an opinion that an overwhelming number of people possess. I think it's just within our nature to not trust that everything that happens to us is on the up and up, or just the force of the cosmos, and that there's possibly just someone out there who's trying to get you. I'm not going to confirm or deny that. I have no idea either way, but I will acknowledge that as of only a couple years ago, we had no idea that the NSA was regularly listening in on every single American citizen. So that paranoia isn't necessarily unfounded. But Mark, I hear you say, the NSA is not a secret society. What do you mean by a secret society? Well, if you want my off-the-cuff definition, I would have to say that a secret society is an organization of people, whether it's loose-knit or tightly knit, that are doing their best to stay organized without the knowledge of the public. And why would such an organization exist? But there's a number of reasons. I think most innocently, you could suggest that people just like I said, they just like keeping secrets. Perhaps there are people out there who like to be forces of good without the recognition and work towards controlling the public in a manner that is just beneficial to everybody. But I would say more and most likely that a secret society acts upon its whims in order to evade the law. Not every criminal organization is a secret society by virtue, but simply by necessity. If you're committing crime and you're not high profile like the mob or the Yakuza or anything like that, you most likely don't want the public to know about you if you're doing something on a large-scale organizational way. Most of the time when you bring up the term secret society, one particular organization comes to mind, and that is the Illuminati. This nebulous organization may or may not exist, but there are plenty of conspiracy theorists who believe that there is this cabal of elite who have a direct hand in the events of the world, and oftentimes it does not involve the best interests of the people. The Illuminati is often used as a benchmark for evil secret societies, either in fiction or in conversations that are critical of how the world is run politically and socially. Once again, people just really like the idea that there's someone out there working their hardest to control you without you knowing it. For all intents and purposes, the Illuminati being the most famous secret society makes them not a secret society at all. But once again, we're not even sure if an organization like that exists. And I would have to say, editorializing, that such a society doesn't need to exist because the people in charge are the rich and the elite and the powerful, and they're not controlling us secretly. They make all the rules. They form our governments. They do anything. Why do we need an Illuminati? There's some sort of secretive do they, don't they exist organization when, they're just people out there who act upon their own desires and control the world in their own way. So before I get too preachy, I did want to bring up today's last topic, which is 5 secret societies that you may or may not have heard of. I have an incredible book in my hands by John Michael Greer called The Element Encyclopedia of Secret Societies. This book is part of the Element series, which is a referential grouping of books that deal with more esoteric topics. I own quite a few of these books because as a writer, I like to have a frame of reference towards real world topics that I can use in my fiction. I have the Element Book of 1001 Magic Spells, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a book of spells that were collected by quote unquote magic users throughout history. And it's just great to see how people tried to engineer magic back in the day or even today. I'm not judging any witchy people out there. Anyway, this book has an exhaustive list of secret societies, and I wanted to go through 5 that you may never have heard of before. First, we have the Fraternal Order of Eagles. In the winter of 1898, the burlesque theaters and saloons of the Lava Beds, Seattle's notorious red light district, faced a musician strike. 6 prominent businessmen from Lava Beds sat down on a pile of lumber in a shipyard a few blocks from their establishments and worked out common strategy to deal with the strike. In the course of the meeting, they decided to start meeting regularly and half-jokingly name themselves the Independent Order of Good Things. In the weeks after the original meeting, other Lava Bed business owners and employees asked to join this organization, and the idea of creating a fraternal order modeled on the Elks, another order founded by people in the theater industry, occurred to the founders. A month after their first meeting, the Independent Order of Good Things renamed itself the Fraternal Order of Eagles. There is a famous quote from one of my favorite TV shows, The Gilmore Girls, that says, "If you put enough Anglo-Saxon men in the room together, they'll start making new clubs." Unlike most fraternal orders, the Eagles continued to expand through the first half of the 20th century. 3 American presidents, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Harry Truman, were members. I've never really been a frat guy, but I do really like the name The Order of Good Things. And hey, a secret club with FDR in it can't be all that bad, can it? Next on our list is the Knights of the Flaming Circle, simply because these guys have a name that sounds like it's out of a cool video game. Like, I want to be in the Knights of the Flaming Circle. Founded in 1923 in Pennsylvania, the Knights of the Flaming Circle was a secret society organized to oppose the revived Ku Klux Klan. Its member wore robes with a flaming red circle on the left breast, symbolizing truth. It welcomed Catholics, Jews, and blacks into its membership. One of several anti-Klan secret societies founded during the 1920s, it ceased operations with the collapse of the revived Ku Klux Klan. I love that. That makes me so happy, and I want to see a movie about the Knights of the Flaming Circle. This is a story that Quentin Tarantino would direct. Just like the Knights being the secret society that opposed the KKK. I love it. I want to see it. It reminds me of Django Unchained, which is why I said Quentin Tarantino. If you have seen that movie, you know what I mean. Number 3 on our list is the Odd Fellowship. I like this, once again, just because of the name, and I like anything odd. This is the GSMC Weird News Podcast, after all. The Odd Fellowship was founded in the 1700s, and it distinguished itself from many other clubs and societies of the time by helping its members when they were in financial trouble. At a time when health insurance and social welfare programs were unknown, Odd Fellow lodges were collected money to meet the bills of members who became ill, pay for the funerals of those who died, and support the widows and orphans. That's wonderful. During the course of the 18th century, this evolved into a system of regular contributions and benefits. In exchange for paying a small sum into the lodge treasury each week, members could count on fixed weekly sums for sick pay, funeral expenses, and survivor benefits. This system was widely copied by the fraternal orders throughout the English-speaking world and inspired the fraternal benefit societies of the 19th century. That is just such a cool concept to me. Like, you know, we're living in a world where the communities don't necessarily take care of each other. And once again, I am never going to get up on a soapbox on this particular podcast, but I will say that there are times when it seems like we are not out there to help each other. So when I hear about a secret society that helps out its members, pretty cool. I mean, we're not always all doing well at the same time. So if you're throwing in a little bit of money and then your bros take care of you, that's pretty cool. I applaud something like that. It makes me want to join a secret society. Or, like I said earlier, let's start one. Hit me up on social media. We'll have a secret word. We'll like poke our eyebrows with our thumb and middle finger. I'm just doing it right now. So that's why I thought of it. And that means that we're in the GSMC Weird News Secret Society. And then once again, we'll just throw all our gold into a treasure chest. And, you know, if you're having a bad week, you can't work, you're having your appendix out, and, you know, your job at Tim Hortons doesn't want to pay your medical bills, then we'll take out some of that gold. What's wrong with that? I love hearing that when a community doesn't or can't trust its greater government to take care of it, that the community will take care of itself. I'm sure it's a bit more nuanced than that, and secret clubs don't necessarily ensure that the best methods are taking place, but I like hearing about that regardless. I kind of want to incorporate that in some way in my writing. I don't know. Number 4 on our list, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, or the OBOD, the largest and most active Druid order in the world as of this writing. The Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids was founded by Ross Nichols and a group of fellow Druids from the Druid Circle of the Universal Bond after a disputed election for leadership. Nichols, a poet and painter who had served as the Universal Bond secretary for some years, focused his new order's work on the bardic arts of poetry and music and brought in the 3 grades of Bard, Ovate, and Druid from Welsh traditions of Druidry. Never large, OBOD nonetheless played an important role in publicizing Druidry in Britain, but on Nichols' death in 1975, it went dormant. Here's the thing. I love the occult. And so I think what I love more than the occult is the idea of men who are older than I am dressing up and acting as wizards or other magical peoples. Now, before I get complaints, I know a druid is not a wizard, but I really do like these occult societies where there is an idea of like-minded people preserving the old concepts of magic. And Druids, if you are not aware, are basically nature-loving, paganistic figures, not always necessarily overtly and occultly religious, but oftentimes having their spirituality connected to naturalism and the perseverance of the natural world over industrialism. So I'm always a big fan to hear that there's dudes running around in secret orders where they're like keeping magic alive. That's cool. That's something that exists in a book, yet it's happening in real life. That's why I wanted to talk about these guys. Also, while we're at it, man, secret societies of like poets and writers and artists, like that's what I want to be a part of. As an artist, like get me in on that. Am I not good enough? Secret societies? Sorry, I'm still outraged from the previous segments, so that's why I'm getting a little haughty here. Finally, closing out the show, we have the Sand Society, SANDE Society, one of the two most widespread secret societies in West Africa. The Sand Society is a women's society found along Upper Guinea coast and Sierra Leone to Liberia. In earlier times, before Christian and Muslim missionaries gained influence in this area, most girls were initiated into the Sand Society as an essential part of their transition to womanhood, while boys became members of a similar Poro society. To be initiated into the society, candidates undergo a series of ritual encounters with the Sand Spirit, a female entity associated with rivers and fertility. Masked dancers wear a distinctive wooden helmet mask to represent the spirit and pass on women's mysteries to the new initiates. A council of sand elders oversees these rites and also traditionally wields a great deal of political and economic authority, which, however, is balanced by the influence of the men's Poro society. I am a big proponent of secret women's societies. That's why this one was number 1, you guys. Like, when you think of secret societies, at least in the context of much of what we were talking about today, it's a bunch of rich dudes just like, maybe we can control the world. I'm digging secret women's societies, and although the Sand Society has sort of lost political favor in modern times, it remains a living tradition across a sizable area of West Africa today. Cool stuff. Well, that about wraps it up for today's show. I would very much like to thank you once again for tuning in. I've been your host, Mark Swan, and we've had kind of an angry episode, but I think we were able to get through it together. And hey, maybe we've formed a secret society in the process. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and good night.